So what I like to do is you have to fold this inside out and right side in and all around, and I always get confused on what's upside right and what's right side down and all that stuff. So what I do is I'll take a piece of blue tape or green tape, no preference in color, and a marker, and I will put on the letter F. You could use the name. Some people like to actually type the name in, I think, or write the name in on it, right?
Good idea.
And then I'm going to just rip this guy off. And thank you, Scott. And I'm going to just take this guy and actually tape him onto the cap. And so you can see that I've got my F right side up. Hopefully that's showing good. Maybe I'll bring it a little closer. There it is, camera. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Pirates do have eye watches. Sorry about that. I forgot to take it off. Costume's a little different. So what I'll do is take and fold my cap outside and then bring it up. And so you could see how that could be confusing if you didn't have that on there. So real good trick. The other trick to this is how do I hoop this in a round hoop? Not everybody has the wonderful Melco fast clamps yet, but if you don't and you have the round hoops that came with the machine, you can still sew this cap. And so what I like to do, I'll be right back. I like to take a piece of tearaway backing. I will put it inside the hoop so that I have, or inside the hat, so I have a full round area to hoop. And then when I do that, and we don't have a work table in here, which kind of is a bummer. I will take and put my cap, usually you're doing this on a table. I will take and put the cap on, and so imagine this void area in here is actually tearaway, and then I would take and hoop it up. So it doesn't, Scott, it really doesn't matter if I have, oh, look at that, my Obi-Wan was here to help me. So now that we have this, I can show you a little bit better. It still would help to have a table. Maybe for Christmas, Scott, you could bring me a workbench. Okay. So if Scott could hold that part, so he's like my work table right now, then I would take and make sure that I put the notch out front and I could hoop it so that not the whole cap is fitting into this round part, but the backing is going to hold it in place while we sew it. And then we would just tear it out. So once again, my trick for the day is the tape with the letter F, or you could put name on it, whatever you want, but do that before you turn the cap inside out. This works for Christmas stockings as well. So, you know what would be great, Scott, is if we had another trick-or-treater come by and see, oh, it's Obi-Wan. Look, folks.
One more trick to add to this that helps a ton is if you put tape or a pin from the material to the backing, it keeps that front edge from drawing up, so it'll keep your layers or whatever more even.
I didn't know that one. That's cool.
Yeah. And the wider the tape, kind of the better off you are. Grab a little bit, grab it, put it on the backing. Way, way better. Tape is totally one of my favorite tricks and or treats for embroidery.
Well, seeing how you use tape a lot,
Can't do much without it.
is there an issue with certain types of tape leaving residue behind?
So
or
were you watching me last night?
Maybe.
So I was working late on a costume to go with my nephews tonight. And all I had around was Gorilla Tape, which has a lot of adhesive, and that's super sticky, and my needles were absolutely disgusting, so don't do that one. I'm a big fan of the blue tape because it's a light tack, but it doesn't, I like the green tape too, but if I'm doing anything with water-soluble topping or water-soluble backing, I don't want to use that as much because it has that compound in it that reacts with moisture to make it seal better and make paint lines cleaner, and that reacts with the water from using with water soluble topping. So not my favorite thing for that. So blue is probably my favorite. I have used others when
Well,
I absolutely needed to.
So you mentioned getting gummed up needles from tape or adhesive. Um, I, I know a trick, but I'm going to ask you guys if you know the treat to this. How can we clean those needles, or do we need to just replace them?
Clean them with alcohol. That's my go-to.
I don't mess around with it. I swap them out. To
You
a
swap
titanium,
them out?
and I just don't
Yeah.
mess around with it. But
I
after that adhesive last night,
yeah,
the
that stuff is just
it
crazy.
was gross.
Yeah.
Like this or spray adhesive. Yeah, I totally get it. Do not do what I did last night.
Yeah, alcohol's a good idea. I
Cotton ball.
I don't know. Maybe it's just my dad, coming through me. But WD-40 is my go-to. I'll put WD-40 on a
fabric.
tissue and take and wipe the needle. I won't spray it on the fabric, Obi-Wan, but I'll spray it on the tissue and wipe the needle down without the thread in it, and then re-thread it. Usually that gets rid of the gumminess on the needle. So if you want to try that, you can, or you can go with Obi-Wan solution, and that's just replace the needle. Do we have any questions at this point?
Only in that they can't hear me real well, so I'm going to get a little bit friendlier with you because you're the only one with a working microphone at the moment. So it's totally my fault. Other things that I think about, we had mentioned tape. You use a different tape for a completely different purpose that I never thought about. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so, wow, I wonder if I should go get the piece that I use from class. So, let's say you're doing a finished patch or something where none of the garment is going to be in the hoop. What I do is take a piece of cutaway, hoop the entire cutaway in the hoop like Mike showed you with the tearaway, but I'll cut out a window where the embroidery will go. I'll go buy double-sided carpet tape. Comes in 3 different varieties. The medium is the one I recommend because one is way too light and one is, well, it pulls the fabric apart when you pull it off, which kind of isn't what you want after you do the embroidery. So the medium is a good grade. So we put a short piece like on each of the 4 corners or something like that of carpet tape. So it's stuck to the backing, but it's open in the middle. Put down your garment or your patch or whatever you have, sometimes slide, or as they call it, float, a piece of tearaway underneath just to add a little backing. And then when you're done sewing it, you can just pull it off. We used to use this for dress ties because the ties were too small for the smallest hoop. And so to stick them in place, we did about 50 ties, logos on ties before we'd have to replace the carpet tape. So $6 a roll, that stuff is just sent from the embroidery.
So recap
people.
on that trick is the carpet tape medium tack.
Yep.
And then that allows you to take and have it to where then you can float the tearaway. And kids out there, what we mean about floating the backing.
We can show you.
Yeah, let's walk over here and we'll kind of show that.
Show you if I had the other half of that.
The hoop is missing, folks. The hoop is missing. We gave it away. I think
there it is.
someone left it in the cap. Sorry about that.
That's right.
And just give us 1 second here to hoop something up. Good job, Obi-Wan.
That is terrible hooping. Do not judge my hooping. So let me make sure you guys can see that. Let me zoom in for you guys. Do you want to float that?
I will
for me
float
just a
this.
second? I'm going to zoom in slowly so as to not make y'all car sick.
So this is not a Jedi trick. Everybody can do this. You don't have to go through Jedi Academy to do this. So here's your hoop. All we're going to do is I'm going to pull this up for a minute so you can see, but there's a space in between the needle plate and the bottom of the backing that's hooped. Imagine that being material. What we're going to do is we're going to slip the tearaway in between those 2 spots, and that is what's called floating backing. So I'll do this a lot, guys, on when I'm sewing caps, the backs of caps. Instead of hooping the backing every single time with the backs of caps. And if I'm not doing a ton of back of caps, I'll once again use the round hoops for that. If you're doing thousands upon thousands of those, or whatever makes sense to you to get your return on investment, there is a back of cap clamp that's available. But if you're just doing some every so often, you can always use those. And then once again, use that float method to get it in. Now I have a trick for you guys.
We've got one question.
Oh, one question.
You've got a break.
Yep.
You can hop back.
Yep.
How, if you do have the Melco fast clamp, what are some of the best ways to handle hooping the garments that you were looking at? Tearaway, cutaway, what do you do?
Yeah, so great question. So on the fast clamps, if I'm doing like stocking caps or stockings, basically if it's something that I don't wear as a garment, and you know, obviously a hat is a garment for your head, I guess.
I have had gentlemen without hair request cutaway, if that's where you're headed.
Yeah, so usually with caps and stockings, I use tearaway. If it's got something that is apparel wise that I wear, typically I'll put cutaway on there, and the reason for that is the tearaway. If the garment is going to shrink a little bit when it goes into the wash, the cutaway will give it a little bit more stability and not get you that puckered look after the garment is washed. So that's why we would use cutaway, right, Scott?
Yes. One more issue, a thought too, is when we're talking of floating the backing, that's only for tearaway. We wouldn't float cutaway. You'd want to have that in the hoop.
Yeah. And so that, boy, great point, Scott. Yeah, never float cutaway unless you're doing some crazy application that we've not thought of. Yeah, don't be a Nate Moore on that one. So most times we want to be Nate Moore, but in that case, don't do it. So no, but we are actually going to do a Facebook Live here in a couple weeks on backing stabilizer and how that can help and what types of backings to use. But once again, on the stocking caps with the Melco Fast Clamp or stockings, I would use a tearaway backing. And I wouldn't do it much different than I did with the round hoop. The only difference is I would open the arms up, and unfortunately we don't have a fast clamp in here to show you at this time. Oh, there's one down there. Well, you know what? Trust me that put in the tearaway first, then slide in the cap and close the clamp. I still would use the F to make sure that your design is oriented the correct way, and must have had a funny comment.
I'm going to kill Doug.
Doug Razor. Thanks for chiming in, Doug. Arr. What did Doug have to say to us?
He wanted to know what Scott was dressed as, and I told him he was dressed as an embroidery expert. So
Yeah, and he is every day. He is our resident embroidery expert, that's for sure. So we actually kind of pulled the costumes out last minute, and we forgot to tell Scott. So it was a big joke on him. So any other questions, Nate?
Thanks for the clamp info.
The other thing on the clamp, as Nate's looking through there, make sure as you're changing material types, just like a presser foot, make sure that you're rotating those knobs. And let me go ahead and grab it.
Your mic again. You can have both hands.
Oh, I feel like, yeah, maybe I'll just let it hang for a minute there. Can we still hear it? Okay, so what you'll want to do is, and I'm missing the piece that I wanted. Yeah.
What do you mean?
So when you have this thing set up completely, typically you'll have these little adjustment knobs on the very top here. And so just make sure that you're adjusting these guys down so that when you close it, the material's not going to slide, but you don't want it so dang tight that Hercules has to come in and release this. There's foam, and I'm sure it's got an actual real name, but I call it foam. It's like the stuff that my dad would put between the truck bed and the topper when he'd put the topper on the pickup truck in the winter. This insulation stuff, you just want it enough to where it closes and the material won't move, but it doesn't have to be so tight that you're going to have surgery to release the tendonitis from your wrist from opening and closing the Melco Fast Clamp. So that's one thing that I've seen out at the shops that are using it, that they have this way too tight, and it's not necessary. So just make sure as you're changing materials, adjust your adjustment knob on the clamp to fit that material type. And once again, Scott, like we said, make sure it doesn't slide, but it doesn't have to be super tight. And another funny comment.
Oh no, that's Justin Sherkle.
Oh, thanks, Justin.
He wants to know if you have any tricks for embroidering on eye patches from Captain Bob and Hook.
Yeah. Justin, you come see me next time you're in the office, and we'll go over. No, we
So,
don't.
we do have one coming in, and this is something that I did when I was running on competitions machines, because I only had 7 needles. I'm good. And the question was, how do I handle a design that if my design has more than 16 colors, what do I do? Because I only have 16 needles. So that's kind of a scary thing.
Buy another embroidery machine?
No.
Oh, okay. Just kidding, kids.
The trick for me is find a color that I use. Let's say I had 17 colors in the design. Find a color that I used only in the first half, and find a color that exists only in the second half. And when you are done with that first half in the color sequence, let's say that was on needle 1, I would put in a hold command, and then I would use needle 1 again for that secondary color. And when the hold command comes out, I swap out the cone, and then I hit go, and it runs with that second color. I did that again when I was running the competitions machines. I was running a 13 color design on a 7 needle machine.
Oh my.
We actually split the design into 2 pieces so we could have it colorized differently. The biggest unfortunate trick of that is you have to remember to put the threads back where they were when they started before you start the next run. Somebody might not have done that once. So just be very, very careful with that. I do, again, really silly things, and I run designs that are more than what I have.
So maybe I missed it, but when you're setting the color sequence up in Melco OS,
Yeah.
How can we switch over to the screen and show that?
Yeah, I got it.
You get the machine?
You get that.
I'll get the machine. Hold on one second. So I just want to make sure that we capture this information from Obi-Wan on Obi-Nate on how we set that color sequence for something and what we do to get the machine to kind of stop in a state where we can change out the colors.
Justin was serious. He wanted to know a trick for actual patches, not just eye patches.
Oh, literal patches. So suggestion, thanks Justin. We thought you were being a smart aleck. Imagine that, right? So patches, we have a very, very good document on the Melco blog. So if you go to melco.com, click on the blog up at the top. Underneath there, we've got a patch document. If it's not there, it also is available on our YouTube channel and the Facebook page here at Melco. So we got a great document on making one-off patches. Huge fad right now. A lot of people are wanting one-off patches, and hey, what great way to get that business is. Look at that document on Melco. If you have questions on it or comments on it,
Cool.
Feel free to post some comments on Melco's Facebook page, and the applications team is here for you. By the way, shout out to the other application team members, John LeDrew in Washington State. We've got Samantha Samantha Mirabal down in Florida. Hopefully she's not getting eaten by a gator right now. Just kidding.
Wow.
And my good friend and the one that we've all learned a lot from, Mr. Mark Davis in Atlanta, Georgia. So got some great members of the application team looking for your questions. But let's get back to this one.
Swap back over, yeah. So I'm going to swap.
Camera 1, here we go.
Yeah. All right, so these machines have been moved around a few times and things have changed, but what I would do is I would drag just a pause command down in between, and this is where I would swap out my cone of thread. So I would use all 16 colors in the first chunk. This is, we're going to say that it has way more colors than it does. And then after that, I would use, well, I'd probably use one of the ones in the first row just because they're easier to swap out. And I would use that over and over again. For the first half, I would use it as red, and for the second half, I would use it as purple. And so when this pause command hits on the color sequence when it's running and it stops, I would then go in and swap out that cone. And then
So this is in the simplified user interface, and maybe not everybody has this. Could you show us in the regular traditional view?
Same process. I would just add a hold in this case. hold here and pause in the other are the same. This is not the case for older versions of OS, where if you put in a pause command, it will stop at every color change, which is super fun.
How would you erase the hold and not the whole color sequence, Nate?
So I would select the hold and hit erase.
Okay, and then as you can see that he's got color 3 highlighted, and so the hold is going to go above whatever you have highlighted, just so that it might save you some time.
It won't. I forget every time.
Really?
And I have to go select the hold when I put it in the wrong place and hit erase. So
here's
good.
You know what? And I know we might be running a little late, but before we switch over cameras, can you show me, let's say that this is my normal color sequence, but I need to have color 8 between 13, or color number 13 and 7. So the third in the color sequence needs to be 8. Do I need to start all over, or is there a way that I can get that in there?
If you double click on the color, it will begin to flash, and then you can swap that out with whatever you want. So you said you wanted needle 8?
Yep.
So I double click on it, it begins to flash, and then you can just go change it out.
Cool. So
Right,
that's
I'm gonna go swap that back.
a nifty way to save some time on changing color sequence, and that hold method is a really good method. Also can be used if you're doing like puff, right? If we're doing 3D foam, and let's just call Scott a lumberjack today. Why not? He looks like a lumberjack.
Does
So.
this apply for the Bravo as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so the Bravo, that's why we wanted to show you this traditional interface. The Bravo has the traditional interface only, but it does apply to the Bravo. You have that hold command, and the way that we set it up in this interface that we just were in, the last one that Nate was working in, that's how you would do it for Bravo.
Another question we got was, how do I use cones that don't fit on my machine?
Oh.
Any way you can. So I typically will have kind of my odd spool feeder, whatever that looks like, and I will have it either on one side or the other, or on the back of the machine, so that any extra thread can kind of spool to the side where it's not going to get caught, or to the back. At home, I actually have a hook on the back wall, so I can feed it this way. And so for like a standard, because my nephew picked out this thing at a fabric store, which was never meant to be on my machine, and it's a tiny little spool of this metallic ribbon. But I actually rigged so it would spin off of, I bent a paper clip, honestly. So it had two little pieces, and I fed it between there, bent it back, and I taped it so that it could spool up and not get caught. So kind of any way you can. There are kind of helpers, hooks, guides, whatnot.
Did you use a gum wrapper in it, though?
No, I was not that cool.
So
I was not MacGyver.
You didn't achieve a Guyverness. So
No, I'm
sorry
not
about
that cool. I'm really sorry about that.
Wow.
I know.
All right,
I
so
got one.
you got one, Scott? Scott's got a trick or treat for us.
Yeah, this will be the trick of the day, I guess you could say. When sewing dog collars or webbed materials in the Melco fast clamp, or really for whatever you pick, I noticed that when I had seen a lot of the samples that people had done, it's like the name, let's say that we're putting letters, which is going to be common on a dog collar. The name seems to drift as it sews from being centered on the collar. And so, and also, of course, the webbing is very uneven surface, and so you tend to get ragged edges. So, two tricks, I guess you could say. The first one being, we use zigzag underlay underneath the text.
Over to the design shop?
You want to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's switch over to the design shop.
You gotta get in the mic.
Oh, I got it. I think they can hear me. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll pull up Design Shop, start a new window, and let's just spell out Melco. Looks like somebody's changed the font. I'm going to go with block. Just so you can see, block 2 is fine. Shrink the size, it's 1/2 inch, so you can imagine from here. We'll center it. Okay, so right click, go to properties. Underlay is going to be right here. If I enable auto, chances are at this size I'm probably going to get an edge walk. And so for this example, I want to do zigzag, so I'm going to pick it instead of just pick auto.
Okay.
And I like to do absolute. We
I'm
go
a
back and
percentage guy.
forth.
Yeah.
on this one.
I'm percentage on zigzag and absolute on
Wow.
edge walk because of the direction of the stitching.
All right, so we use zigzag. Why do we use zigzag? That usually builds loft for knit material. And this is really, in effect, building loft. It's keeping the stitches up out of the webbing so that the edges are going to be clear. Just try it. You won't believe it. On a stable material, I would never normally use zigzag, but for uneven surfaces, it works great. The second huge tip to keep the name centered or the letters centered inside the dog collar is to pick your horizontal stitch order. So we go to letters. Right here is horizontal stitch order. Left to right is default. That's how we write. You want center out. I can't tell you what a difference that makes. So it's going to sew one half, come back one half to the other. We talk about using this and how important it is on hats. But for the dog collars, have a look. You just won't believe the increase in centering and quality that you get with those two tricks. So that's my 2 tricks for the day.
Cool. Thanks, Scott. Nate, do we have any additional questions?
Not that I'm seeing.
All right, so we're going to switch it over to camera 1.
Sorry.
No problem. Our cameraman's a little slow. It's
Aye.
okay. All right, so last thing is keep posting questions. If you've got ideas for good videos for us to do in the future, actually, I want to back up one. I saw one on For the Love of Melco. Once again, great group, awesome group. We love them. One was sewing small lettering on caps and how frustrating that can be because the small lettering always is too thin. So Scott did a really good one on this a while back. Scott, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, center out is going to be very important. Also, there is just limits on hats. When I digitize for a living, I would cut people off at 1/4 of an inch for the minimum size on hats. You can get by with 3/16 letters, 0.20, if you're talking about regular garments, but most baseball hats, I would use 1/4 of an inch. You're stitching on a curved surface. You got the seam down the middle. There's a whole lot of reasons why it has a hard time.
Yeah, and
working.
more times than not, when you see ones that actually are smaller than that, probably were sewn flat and then assembled as a hat.
Yes.
So the other one that I would add is if the lettering is too thin, add some pole comp to it. Go into the pole comp table and add a couple points of compensation to it, and that will beef up, that'll give it a little bit more boldness.
Yeah, and of course, time and time again, I see people try and sew very small letters and they pick the wrong alphabet. We've talked before, letters are made differently based on their size. We have a micro section, which is just for very small letters of times and of block. Use those that are made for the small size you're using. Don't try and
how
take
do I
big.
find out what size that alphabet is made for?
On the current software, it has a flyout once I pick the alphabet, and it will show you the min-max and show you which characters are in the alphabet. Just know that the micro section is for those small fonts, but that's where we live most of the time, doing left chest and hats, so
Yep.
very important.
Good.
Column width is your buddy.
All right, column width is your buddy.
Full offset.
Pole offset.
Column width.
Column width, pole
percentage,
offset,
yeah, it's all
pole
good.
comp, yeah.
Anything.
All these words we throw around as embroiderers,
Well,
huh?
and it's changed throughout the years.
Yes, yes. So thank you for joining us. Happy Halloween from Denver, Colorado, and the Melco Applications team.
Be safe tonight.
Hey, and be very safe tonight and be kind to one another. Have a great day.